There are 14 key seats that Labor should be at risk of losing, but it would appear the coalition has no chance of winning them. What the polls are saying is that in spite of the impossibly undemocratic behaviour by the Andrews government, Daniel Andrews' star is in the ascendant. I'd make 2 points. Matthew Guy as a leader is hopeless, and that is a handbrake on the coalition. The second point I'd make is that I don't believe the polls in relation to Daniel Andrews, and I think something will happen on polling day which will be a shock to Labor. I'll have more to say about that as we get closer to election day. But one metaphor of the disgraceful behaviour by the Andrews government and its instruments, in this instance the police force, involves the case of the 28-year-old pregnant woman Zoe Buhler. Now remember her? Handcuffed and arrested in her home in September 2020 in Ballarat, arrested in front of her 2 young children, just because she created a Facebook post urging people to protest against the draconian lockdowns in Melbourne. A 28-year-old working-class woman in her pyjamas, pregnant, in front of her 2 little children, handcuffed and arrested for the alleged serious offence of incitement. She was merely drawing attention via Facebook to the tyranny and denial of freedom embodied in the Andrews lockdown 2020. The Assistant Police Commissioner then stated that while he regretted the optics of arresting a pregnant woman, he was, quote, absolutely satisfied the officers acted appropriately and Zoe had engaged in serious criminal behaviour, unquote. She had merely urged people to speak up peacefully for freedom. When the matter at the end of August last month went before the Magistrates Court in Ballarat, facing a, quote, serious criminal offence, the same police who had allowed 10,000 Black Lives Matter protesters to go ahead, the same police last month in the Magistrates Court in Ballarat withdrew the charges, offering no explanation other than it was not in the public interest. In the face of all of this, politicians, police and the media, the establishment, were silent. The one man who regularly took bark off Daniel Andrews is the current member for Q, Tim Smith. You will remember he was the bloke who, let's be frank, and he's admitted to this, committed a grave error of judgment, driving while having drunk too much and crashing into a fence near a home in Hawthorn. Tim Smith offered no excuse for his behaviour. He's the kind of bloke, he took it on the chin. He accepted it was wrong. But instead of putting the bloke on the backbench and letting him do time and be rehabilitated, ready for combat to take the fight up to the Andrews government, instead, he is not a candidate at the next election. It should be said here before I speak to him that on that night when he foolishly drove after drinking, it was the night that he heard that Jane Garrett, one of his closest friends, Labor, had breast cancer which had spread throughout her body. She died in July at the age of 49. In a condolence motion for Jane Garrett in the Victorian Parliament, an emotional Tim Smith said, "There is no one you would want more in a trench with you. She was my inspiration. Jane was my best friend." Tim Smith joins me. Tim, thank you for your time. No discussion about drinking, because I know you sort of faced up to all of that. Just quickly, how important was Jane Garrett from the other side of politics as a political and personal friend?
Look, Alan, I really appreciate you raising Jane because she was an inspiration to me. She was my best mate. And you've been around politics virtually all your working life, and you know how these relationships form across the chamber, where people can disagree on virtually everything and become the best of mates. And she was the mayor of the city of Yarra when I was the mayor of the city of Stonington way back in 2009-10. And Stonington, for your viewers outside of Melbourne, is basically the whole of the federal seat of Higgins, and Yarra is basically Richmond, inner Melbourne, Carlton, Fitzroy, that part of very inner woke Melbourne. And look, Jane and I disagreed on virtually everything except for democracy, and we got on like a house on fire. She was a great mate, she was a great inspiration, and I miss her terribly. And that night I did find out that the cancer had spread, and it really hit me hard, and I did something particularly stupid.